right. We're good?
Yes.
All right, we're good. Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the September 18th, 2024 Economic Development Subcommittee meeting to order as it is 5:45. A note to residents. All citizens are welcome to attend public meetings in person. To view the live meeting remotely, citizens are encouraged to watch the live stream on Franklin Town Hall TV YouTube channel or the live broadcast on Comcast Channel 9 and Verizon Channel 29. Meetings are also archived by Franklin TV on the Franklin Town Hall TV YouTube channel and shown on repeat on Comcast 9 and Verizon 29 for those who missed the live meeting. To listen to the meeting remotely, citizens may call in using the number 1-929-205-6099. That's 1-929-205-6099. This will not permit participation in the meeting. To participate in the meeting remotely, citizens are able to join a Zoom webinar using the information provided on the Economic Development Subcommittee agenda that is on the town's website. The Zoom webinar ID is 815-671-4125 and then pound. Any participant who wishes to speak during the webinar must enter their full name and email address when joining the webinar. All participants will be automatically muted upon joining the webinar. In order to speak, participants who have entered full name and email address will need to select the raise hand function to request to be unmuted. All speakers will be required to state their full name and street address before commenting. Today with me in the chambers are Patrick Sheridan and Brian Chandler. Kobe Frangillo is not here right now. We assume that he will be zooming in shortly, and when he does, I'll let everyone know, or when he's here. And today, we are excited to introduce to the Economic Development Committee AJ Rebecki, and he is going to start our has already started our branding project. We mentioned him last meeting, and so tonight, and Councilor Frangillo has just entered the building, so Kobe's here. I'm going to throw it over to Amy to start, to remind everybody where we started and where we've come, and then we'll get AJ and Corey. Corey's here with us as well, and we'll just take it away, Amy.
Sure. Thank you very much. So I had mentioned last week, just to give an introduction about the branding project, the selection committee, which consisted of myself, the chair, Melanie Hamblin, Corey Shea, Director of Arts, Culture, and the Creative Economy, as well as Brian Taberner of the Director of Planning and Community Development. So we had interviewed individuals. We received 5 proposals, and we chose AJ Rebecki to lead the town's branding project, and he's here this evening to talk about some of the work he's done so far and introduce himself. He's a Franklin resident and was the creative director for Wayfair for 4 years. He's drafted Wayfair's brand, visual identity, and talent marketing strategy, and he's now a freelance designer and consultant here in Franklin. So we're happy to have him here. We've kind of gotten him started a little bit. He met with the staff last week, all of our department heads, and kind of talked about some of their needs with this project. And then also I shared with him the survey results. We received over 500 people had responded to our survey, so he's looked through those responses. And I also shared with him the brand audit that we did probably about a year ago now with all of the departments. So he's seen, what logos and letterhead and all the various different things we're using in town to kind of display our brand. So he's aware of all that information. So I'm going to kick it off to him, and he can, introduce himself, and he has a presentation to give. So.
Yeah.
Welcome, AJ.
Well, thank you for having me. This feels weird. Thank you. Tonight we're going to go through a presentation I prepared that basically does a few things. kind of level sets us all on a playing field, an equal playing field of what this project is and what the approach is for it. And we're going to go through the different phases of the project, and then we're going to dive into the first phase, which is brand direction, which is basically the foundation of this project, right? It basically distills Franklin down to its core essence that we will use moving forward to build a visual identity on top of it. So I've created a deck, and we're kind of going to jump right into
You
it.
can see it right in front of us.
Perfect. Awesome. Cool. So I wanted to kick off by just breaking down the difference between brand and visual identity. So brand is the perception and emotional connection people have with a product or place. It is there whether you do something about it or not, right? People have a connection or a perceived notion of what something is, and the messages you put out, the values that you have, and the experiences that you create can help shift that perception of what that brand is. And then visual identity is the visual elements that help represent and reinforce the brand. So what I say is, if brand is a story you tell, visual identity is how you visually communicate that story. And that's the real focus of this project is, you know, how do we show Franklin and Franklin's story in a way that is true and is, it gets buy-in and has people excited about living here and doing work here. I wrote this, I think this was my first slide in my proposal deck, but it was my letter to Franklin. And at the end of the day, right, what we're trying to do is create a visual identity that sums up those feelings of Franklin, right? Is buying shoes from Pizzini's. It's about watching kids dance at the Common on Fridays, right? It's, eating a bagel on Friday morning at Elizabeth's. It's all of those things wrapped into one that makes this place really special. And what I closed it with is to be that beacon for those who want to experience what a tight weave of a strong community feels like, and then also be an emblem of pride for people who call this place home, which is really special. Anytime I do a branding project, I like to sum it up with a big idea, right? Like, what are we trying to do here? And the core thing is, like, I'm not rebranding Franklin. We're not doing that. We're crafting a clear representation of what Franklin already is, right? And at the end of the day, it's about consistent communication with everyone who lives here, right? It's efficiency across all town departments. And ultimately, too, it's a pride and acknowledgement from the citizens that, we love living here, and we want to live here, and we want to do business here, and it's a really special place. So it's about capturing that. I'm breaking up this project into 3 different phases. The first is brand direction, where we're basically going to take an objective look at everything that's here now, the current visual identity of Franklin, the data and survey results from citizens and business owners, and figure out kind of what this looks like and how we can build off of it, right? And the culmination is a tagline and some mood boards that will serve as our North Star as we move forward into visual development. And visual development, phase 2, is let's create a logo. Like, what does this look like? And it's not just what does it look like on a slide deck or on a piece of paper in the council chambers. It's what does it look like when it's wrapped in a truck, or if it's on social media and it's a post, what does that look like? How do you build this identity out where it has touch points and emotion across anything and everything it shows up on? And then the last phase is the build out, where we're basically bringing this to real life, getting all the correct files prepared, the brand guidelines, which includes, basically your SOP, your operating procedures of using the visual identity. So, like, how to use color, how to use type, how to use the logo and all the different variations. What does the design system look like? So what does it look like when you're designing things for print or for social media or, email signatures, all that stuff. And then editable and non-editable templates for stationery, email signatures, print, avatars, all the things that go along with it. And then I'm also going to include in that, too, is mock-ups and design direction. I know forward-looking wayfinding signage, environmental signage, vehicle wraps are super important. So what does that look like when the next phase of this kicks off? Because this does not just, start and end with this project. This is an ongoing evolution that will hopefully last years. So before we go forward, any questions, comments, concerns before we dive deep into the brand direction?
I like this guy.
There's a comment.
Oh, geez. Cool. All right.
Go for it.
All right, let's keep going.
Yeah.
Let's go. All right, so the first part of the brand direction was auditing Amy and the team did most of the work here, bringing everything together, of looking at the current visual identity of the town of Franklin. And there's a couple things you'll see that are just a little off, right? And I broke it down into 3 things, right? There's no concept of right and wrong within the current framework of how we represent ourselves, right? There's multiple versions of the same logos. Styles and typing colors differ across not only the town, but even in same departments, the way that people present themselves is different. And there's just an overall lack of visual cohesion of who we are and how we present ourselves. The second thing is everyone has a logo, and I use that in parentheses because some of these things aren't logos, right? A logo should be, you look at it, whether it's small, big, and you should understand what it is and what its purpose is. There are things just that are all over the map, but positive intent, right? It was an attempt for departments to market themselves, but in doing that, they've built their own image that ultimately hurts the overall identity of the town. And then the last thing is some rules aren't meant to be broken. Like there's gradients, there's fine details, there's overweighted lines, and it's just a lack of hierarchy that leads to legibility issues on just understanding what people are supposed to look at and what message they're supposed to get. So this boils down to 2 things, right? Good design at the end of the day is good intent. We want to think of it as we took the time because we appreciate your time, right? And there should never be a question if a town document is actually coming from the town, which I think we've talked about, we've heard the department heads talk about, we've even seen citizens talk about it online, is that sometimes it's hard to understand, like, is this real, is it not, is it a scam? That's what happens nowadays. And the second thing too is that at the end of the day, we're wasting time and wasting money. The lack of guidelines in a design system puts unnecessary pressure across all departments to make decisions that they should not be making, right? Like, how should this look and what format should I use? It wastes time and costs money at the end of the day that we're going to rectify by having a system in place. Let's talk about the data. So, Amy said there was almost 500 respondents to the survey. I read all of them. It was great. It was a lot, but hopefully I'll give you a little bit of a cliff notes. Was that it? Yeah, cliff notes about kind of what I found out. Here's some major points. So 70% of respondents have lived in Franklin for over 10 years, which is phenomenal. But what we saw here is that the longer that someone lived in the town, their overall sentiment towards the town decreased. It might seem surprising, but we're going to talk about it later. I don't see it, a town is sort of a product, right? Because you want people to live and work here, but at the end of the day, I think of it more of as an employer situation, is that like there is a give and get on both sides of it. And you see it in the employer brand world, is that people who spend longer times with the company, over time they get a little bit jaded because they see change and they see things that not necessarily they maybe agree with, but they stay there because they like the people, they like the value that they bring, and they like the overall connection they have with it. But it does dip over time. Citizens who have lived here under 10 years have the highest sentiment scores. So these people, moved to the town recently. They love it here. They the education, the safety, all of the things that they really spoke highly of. 35 to 54 was the age group with the highest neutral positive to positive sentiment scores. That was kind of like the Goldilocks zone of age group that had the most positive things to say. And that while males made up 1/3 of the respondents, they actually have the lowest sentiment scores compared to the females and did not respond for gender. So the males who took the survey were more harsh in their criticism towards the town and the direction it is going in compared to females.
They were grumpy.
You could say that. Yeah. that's a great question. So sentiment, there's an analysis program that I use that basically uploads all of the raw data and then assigns basically 0 for a neutral sentiment based on tone, language, et cetera, a -1 for really aggressive language or really negative sentiment, and then a +1 for positive words, positive things, et cetera. So like that's how kind of sentiment was figured out here. And then there's 42 towns, cities, and counties named Franklin in the United States, with 23 of them named specifically after Ben Franklin, which is a lot. So when we talk about being unique, you know, we are unique, but we got to find ways that we can kind of stand out.
We were the first.
We're going to get, yes, we are the first. So you can see that there is a whole bunch of Franklins out there in the wild, and a lot of them follow this kind of same, I don't know, you could call it old-timey kind of sense of just nostalgia, right? There's like almost like a medical illustration quality to this, or like a really, you know, old school seal style. They kind of all follow that same direction. So in terms of being able to stand out, and you know, we have the ability to do that. And you can see Franklin, Tennessee, and Franklin, Wisconsin, in my research recently did a rebrand. So, you know, they kind of stick out because they've recently undergone a, you know, rebrand / visual identity work. When I look at the data, multiple choice is great, right? Multiple choice because it, you know, it allows people to check a box and you can get a large amount of aggregate. But when I look at data like this, I try to look at the open responses, right? Because that's where people have the ability to not be in a mold and be able to really speak their mind on the things that they feel. And there was 4 open responses on the survey. What does Franklin do better? What do we want from Franklin's future? What makes Franklin special? And share your thoughts and opinions. And I try to look for what is the shared sentiment, good and bad, across all of those different open responses that everyone feels. And there's 4 things. First was passion. There is a desire from everyone to keep Franklin great. It's a great town. People love living here and doing business here, and everyone wants to protect that. 2, this idea of like selflessness is that the wants and needs of the survey respondents are rarely for the here and now, but looking forward to how this town is going to be great for future generations. The 3rd, there was a lot of nostalgia that came up. There's a strong undercurrent of remembering what Franklin used to be, which then is a little bit of, you know, we talk about sentiment scores between newly moved here and people who have lived here longer, where, you know, people who are new to this town already think it's great, while people who have lived here long want to get back to what it used to be. So there's something there. And then skepticism, the necessity and efficacy of a town brand, especially with concerns around development and allocations, was huge, and, you know, was shared across the board, across all 4 open responses. And then I try to figure out what's important to us all, right? And there was 5 things that were recurring when we thought about what's important. The idea of safety, which I think we talk about a lot, and you can see it in the news and, you know, publications, stuff like that. You know, this is a very safe town. Education, so maintaining and improving the quality of schools and educational resources was massive. Keeping that small town Americana feel, right, to, you know, keep it close-knit and avoid overdevelopment was a big concern. This idea of a close-knit, inclusive community was 4th. And then I think the most common positive sentiment across any question, any group, et cetera, was the continued respect for our parks and our open spaces here, I think was a common thing that everyone talked about. So that's a lot of stuff. My job is to kind of boil it down. Like, what does this all mean, right? And there's 4 things that I kind of boiled it down to. Is at the end of the day, Franklin is a town of duality, is that juxtaposing themes is a major theme in this data, right? You would have things like a respect and passion for outdoor spaces and natural environments next to the symbolism of permanent structures like libraries and schools. And then you wanted to have protecting small town values and community and that feeling of Americana, but also recognizing that smart development and modern amenities support infrastructure, funding, lower taxes. It's all a give and take. Second thing, it's kind of been, it's mostly Horace, right? Although we're named after Ben Franklin, the true connection lies within Horace Mann's legacy. Ben's symbolic, we know that, but his influence isn't a key factor in why people live here or do business here today. If you said, why do you live in Franklin? No one's gonna say, it was because of Ben Franklin 200 years ago. They don't. I'll tell you what they talk about, but it's rarely that. Instead, I think education is central to Franklin's identity, right? And residents expect an unwavering support from local government to maintain that connection. The third thing is Franklin means family. Whether it's multi-generational families or newcomers, Franklin is known for putting down its roots. So there's a strong sense of community and bringing up a family here that I think sets Franklin apart from other towns, especially ones that I've lived in. And the last one, Franklin's stuck. Everyone wants the best for Franklin, but there's a debate on how to keep our community vibrant yet small. I wrote that the motto, industry need not wish, is more relevant than it seems. It reminds us that success comes through effort and progress, not just entitlement and waiting. So I think while some residents feel like we are at a point of impasse or frustration, I think it's just a natural part of progression of figuring out what this is and what the long-term Franklin looks like. Questions? Concerns?
This is beautiful. I came in, so I put a lot of thought into the brand and what, how I think of the benefits of Franklin. For all the reasons you said, it's so hard to. I don't know how you're gonna do it, and hopefully we'll help you. But take all these concepts into something, and where my mind, where my mind went when I think of the selling points of Franklin, I was using the word balance, use duality. It's that we have a little bit of everything in a way that's impressive. The other is that we're a really good place for families and sort of intergenerational living. And the last that I was not expecting you to highlight, but was going to bring is I think, as we think of symbols and through lines, the unique history is not the fact that the books were donated to the library, but that they were read by Horace Mann and who went on to found modern education. Yeah. And like that's the full story of that. So the fact that you pulled those as your first three is awesome. This is a good sign. Yeah, awesome. And then, my only other point was going to be, and I again love how you handled it. I have a high skepticism of surveys. Non-scientific surveys. There's going to be a massive selection bias based on who participates. Like, why do we have that age group and mostly women? Because it was mostly shared on Facebook and Facebook groups, and that's who's there. And so just recognizing the limitations.
There should be some asterisks there, like you said, the way it was shared, right? There's probably some recency bias. I understand there was some surveys that went out a few weeks leading up to it, so that could factor into some of the responses as well. And again, 500 is a great number, but it's a small sample size for a very large community. So but on the other hand, we respect the opinions of people who took the time to fill out that information. And part of this work as a resident, every single time I sit down to do work, I need to stop and take a little bird's eye view and act like I don't live here, right? You have to be a neutral party when it comes to this, because that's how you get things to move forward in a way that is correct, that doesn't have any of my bias put into it as well, right? We all want the Patriots to win every week, but it's not going to happen, right? You got to be honest with ourselves and what that looks like, and it's the same way that I approach this, right? There was a quote, someone, a wonderful citizen, wrote this in the open responses that said, the logo will have to accomplish the impossible task of bridging old and new. By that I mean the people who have lived here their whole lives and who hate what Franklin has become, with more of a city feel, more apartments, smart growth is strategic and good, and more traffic, versus the people who have moved here recently and don't want to climb the ladder and then pull it up behind them. How do you do that? I don't know. But this town is at a crossroads with good people on both sides who are passionate about their stances. Good luck. I think that perfectly summed up everything that I felt going into doing this first part of the work, is that, you know, it's striking that balance. This work is not going to be liked by everyone, and I understand that. My goal is for everyone to see the merit in it and can see a little part of themselves and their experience in it that they can connect to. That is a win, because I can't please everyone. That's never going to happen. But the understanding of how we got to the end and what it means is the important part.
Quick question.
So,
AJ, hold on. Brian has a question.
Hi, AJ.
hi, Brian.
There you go. First of all, I'm glad you're a Franklin resident.
Oh,
'cause
thank you.
You got the feel of the town. You really did. Because there was another, Amy can say, whatever company, I didn't like the logo that we had up there, and I think a lot of the department heads felt the same way. So I'm glad they picked you. And you don't see this because you don't look at yourself, but when you look at your eyes, you're thinking of all the phases at once, 1, 2, 3. I can see it going. So that's great, because you're gonna be able to put it together. Now lastly, Franklin, Tennessee. When you Google Franklin Us, half the time you get results from Franklin, Tennessee.
Yeah.
So I saw their little thing actually didn't have like the industry need not wish. It didn't have Ben Franklin. It was very
Modern?
modern, yeah.
Yeah.
So are you like juggling this kind of?
Yeah, so I think the goal, that's a great question. I think the goal here, first and foremost, is find a logo mark, an identity that works well with the current seal that we have, right? And also some of the aspects that are already in the town, like the Franklin Panther, for example, right? Because at the end of the day, like some of those things will all be seen together. I think something like Franklin, Tennessee and Franklin, Wisconsin, what they've done is they've done, I would call them full branding efforts to change the way that they are perceived out into the wild, where it's more of a marketing campaign and more of a flag raised in the air that says, hey, we don't want you to just be here. We need you to come to Franklin, Tennessee and Franklin, Wisconsin and do business and live here, right? I think what we're going to talk about as we move on is striking that balance of keeping that hometown feel, but also leave the door open for people to understand why it's so special and give them an opportunity to kind of lean into that.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Cool.
Anybody else? No?
So part of the deliverable for this work was to create basically like a manifesto, a brand idea that we can attach ourselves to that will be the basis of the work, and a tagline that goes along with it. And when I was writing this and figuring this out, I originally thought about it from like when I normally do brand work, it's for a company or it's for a product, right? And you do a exercise called what, how, and why, right? What do I do? How is it different than anyone else in the market? And why do I exist? What's the core essence of why I kind of exist as a company? I had to do this a little differently because back to the point I made earlier, I think of this more of like an employer brand situation, where in an employer brand situation where you have a company and a worker, we call it the give, get, feel. Is like, what am I gonna give this company? You know, like what do they expect from me? What is the company gonna get? Like, what am I gonna get from them? And it's not just money, right? It's benefits, it's hard projects, it's collaboration, right? And then ultimately too, like, how am I gonna feel working here? So I try to use that framework when I came up with this kind of brand idea and manifesto. So I wrote that Franklin is found at the intersection of tradition and progress. Our small town values, deep commitment to education, and shared vision for thoughtful development preserve our rich history while creating a brighter future for generations to come. This isn't just any town, it's Franklin. Now I try to shed a little bit light on the way I frame this, right? This idea of found, I think, implies humility, that we're not loudly marketing ourselves. We're not pulling out, billboards on the side of 495 that says, "Come to Franklin," right? We are doing the best work we can within our four walls as a community that naturally, through citizens, from people coming to visit here, becomes a word of mouth thing that says, well, we need to be involved in this somehow. I think this idea of intersection, it blends that idea of classic Americana small town feel and the modern amenities and the thoughtful development that we're moving forward with. This idea of values, education, and development, I think of that as the foundation of Franklin, right? It's that what we expect from our citizens and what they can expect from the town. It's that two-way street. Brighter Future is that nod to, the actions of most of the citizens of being selfless, right? Aimed at benefiting future generations. And the fact that it isn't just any town, has a few plays, but it's a nod to Franklin city status, but also the fact that, there's multiple Franklins, but it's ours. And I thought of a few taglines that could go along with that. And the one that I really landed on was, or the one that I think resonated the most, was the first of many, right? And there's a couple ways that you can slice that up and dice that up. But at the end of the day, the first of many, it's the first town named after Ben Franklin, the home of the first public library, the birthplace of education. It references our leading safety in schools. And I think the most important part, it's forward-looking. It's a forward-looking kind of phrase. It's unrelenting in the pursuit of being a great place to do work and to do business.
Yeah.
Questions, comments?
I think we already said it, right? Right. Like, we're the first.
So how does this then play into step 2, which is visual development? So we've created a framework, a foundation that we think we all agree in, or most of it, right? Now, how does that turn into creating a visual identity for the town of Franklin? So the first step I do is I try to create like visual power words. Like, what are things that I can keep in mind on my desk while I'm sketching or thinking of, ways that I can bring this to life that I think sum up what this is, right? And you have this idea of, pride, forward, momentum, surprising, right? This idea of being deliberate, right? I think deliberate and literal were two words that I think came up a lot in the surveys, and also how I feel is like you have to be really smart in how this is put together and how this is used among the different departments. And this idea of literal was huge. I think there was a lot of black and white in the responses in terms of like, looking for something that people can understand without having to really think about it. And that's basically what design is. Design is not subjective, it's not art, is that people should look at a design or a logo or something and understand what it means as quickly as possible. So from here, I create mood boards. So mood boards are, basically like, you can call them a vision board, you can call them whatever, but they're things that I can look back to as sources of inspiration on where this could end up going. They are not literal. They are just, things that I can look at to say like, oh, like I really like how this, they did this, or how that has motion in it. How can we bring that into play? So I've created 3 mood boards that I'm going to use as inspiration as I work through the visual development portion. This first one is like really just bold and graphic, right? It is, it's clean, it's modern, but there's instances where it still brings in that idea of nostalgia. Like the flyover one has a really cool script in a way that the F is presented, but is still paired with really strong and bold type. The Preservation Society of Charleston in the top right-hand corner, again, really graphic, really bold, but they do things like, they bring in, legacy, like heritage typefaces to kind of balance out the old and the new that I think I really like. And then there's instances too where like in this one in the middle, finding ways to weave in motion I think is really important, because again, progress is at a real, cornerstone of this work and this identity. So figuring out ways to bring that through as well. So this is the first kind of mood board I got pinned up in my studio at home. This second one is a little bit different. it takes a lot of liberties and kind of leans into branding you see down south, especially in the low country. Businesses and municipalities in like South Carolina, Savannah, Louisiana, they do a really good job of keeping a strong connection to, who they are, but also bring in ways that they can keep it fresh and new. And this duality juxtaposition on how it's done is really nice, and it's another thing that I'm looking at as we're kind of building this out. The last one's a little bit more graphic and a little bold. It's kind of like, the sum is greater than, what is it?
Negative space is what I.
Yeah,
Greater than the parts?
yeah, sum is greater than the parts. Yeah, something like that. Someone said that. That was famous. But a lot of, combining elements that individual pieces that make something greater and bigger is something that I'm looking at too. There's a lot of interesting ways that negative space come into play, and just really strong and graphic. And when you see the different colorways that maybe different department uses and things like that, I think that's a really interesting way to look at it. There is no right or wrong. These are just things that I have pinned up, ready to roll in my studio as when we move forward. So what are the next steps? So I would love to take, obviously, any more other questions, comments, concerns at the end of this meeting. But September 23rd, we're asking this group to have any feedback around this presentation, specifically around the manifesto, and the tagline is due by September, it says 18th here, but it's really the 23rd with a big number. Yeah, and then October 9th, I believe, is the public forum to review the first round of decisions. So those are the two biggest milestones in the next few weeks. And again, I thank you for not only hiring me, but having me here tonight and being part of this. And I'm really excited. And yeah, thank you.
Yay!
Thank you, Jay. So you will send this out to everybody so we can see it? And
Yeah, because I don't have a at town. I'm going to send it to Amy, and then Amy can,
send it out?
Yeah.
And
Do
so
that.
we would like responses by the 23rd,
please.
Okay.
If there's any
Okay, that's
comments,
your
questions,
homework.
feedback,
right?
homework,
Yeah,
My specialty.
for AJ.
Okay.
perfect.
Sign homework.
Okay, yeah, well, I mean, that's good, right?
Great.
Yeah, thank you so much, AJ, it was like.
Thank you.
really- Really great.
Appreciate it.
Makes me
It's
feel
fun,
so
right?
excited.
Do
Do
you
you all
need
feel
anything else?
excited?
I
Like,
was.
always just like sitting there stunned, I don't know.
I'm hyped, yeah.
Are you right? Are you excited?
Yeah, I mean, it just gets your brain spinning.
Yeah, it does.
I'm excited to see. I'm really blown away by the start, and it's very more optimistic than I thought I would be. This is great.
Perfect.
Wow, that's wonderful. That's great. I just love how he pulled all that information out and came up with a tagline, like.
Yeah, not only has this,
That's what he does, right?
Yeah.
That's his job, and so
Yeah.
that's like, he's
I'm
really
ready.
good at
Ready to reread it.
it, isn't
yeah.
he?
My one word, and I'll get some eye rolls for it, but a selling point of Franklin compared to other suburbs, or when you think of suburbs that you talk about, usually the first thing they say is great downtown. It's a great downtown.
Mhm.
And I think that core to the town that Franklin remembers and where we're really going to succeed moving forward will be centered in the vibrancy of our downtown. The fact that it's situated on a commuter rail, I mean, one of very, very few with a commuter rail right that just spills out with easy access. You know, once we get to, again, I'm thinking 30, 50 years ahead, once we get to, a regional rail where we're going in and out of Boston, that's really gonna be,
Yeah.
it's gonna be this space of vibrancy and commerce and residents and gathering. So that was I think the only like term or theme that if I could look up to it.
Sure. Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, between like our conversations, this meeting, and then especially the one with the department heads, I think was really awesome because like hearing everyone's different perspectives and their sides and the things that they're concerned about, it all funnels in to make a better end product. So like, if there's anything else that comes up, like, shoot it to Amy, and then Amy get it over to me, because I think it does help.
Thank you. Anything else, Brian?
No?
No? Okay, I guess, anything to add, Amy or Corey?
No, I don't think so. I'll send the slides out with the dates and, just share your feedback, and I'll make sure to get it over to AJ, and look forward to seeing some designs.
And then we'll see him next on the 9th?
On the 9th.
On the
correct,
9th,
yes.
okay. So we'll see you on the 9th, AJ.
Okay,
Thank you so
yes, ma'am.
much. And with that, I will accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.